Good evening and welcome to the last Live from London spring event. You've made it. Congratulations, and Barney, you've also made it, I think, just about.
Just about, yeah.
So to kick off tonight, rather than just saying hello, we're going to have a couple of minutes just chatting about a few things. So let's start with a nice quick one. Barney, how has the festival gone for you?
Oh, magnificently. I think back to the first meeting that we had, the moment we said, okay, Christmas has been good, or it's going well, because we decided to do spring then, and began to turn our thoughts to the spring festival. And you begin by thinking, okay, let's keep it sensibly sized and make sure that the workload is manageable and all that sort of stuff. And here we are. How many events? 14 events later, some masterworks later. It's been magnificent.
So you've actually been able to do quite a lot of conducting in this last series, and even some of it was quite popularly received, I'm happy to report. Shocking.
Surprisingly.
But so how was that for you?
Just a great opportunity. I mean, people who know me will know I really enjoy my conducting. I do get asked the question, would I rather conduct or sing? And I think at the moment, because I can still sing, I would choose that. Being a countertenor, we don't have the world's longest shelf life, but I love my conducting, and I hope it will be a big part of my future. So, and it must be said, to work with the musicians, the conductor always gets a lot of credit, often rightly so. But I do feel in this festival,
But you think not in this case?
No, that's not what I mean. I think that
I know.
It's an honour bestowed on anybody to work with the musicians that I've been very fortunate to collaborate with in this festival, so that's been wonderful.
And it seems funny that we were starting this festival in those cold, February days, and actually our spring has finally arrived.
I've got a bit of a sweat on.
We're sat here on a nice, warm April day.
And it should be said, for those people watching, you'll know that the acoustics in this centre are beautiful for choral music. It's very challenging to film in here because there are big windows, so you'll be able to see properly. There's very naturally lit now. So the sun is streaming in, and as we look forward to maybe another festival, that's definitely one of the challenges.
Well, you said maybe, Barney. I mean, I think...
I wasn't sure we were ready for the big reveal.
I'm not sure we are, but I think so many times every week we're getting asked what happens next. Obviously, we're aware that life is slowly evolving in different parts of the world. We're hoping to get back to live music making with a real live audience at some point in the not too distant future. But we do have some plans in place, don't we, Barn?
We do. We're very pleased to be able to announce Live from London Summer, which, as Live from London Spring, Winter and the summer before, has got a very exciting lineup of artists.
So this is actually year two.
It is year two.
Isn't that crazy to think about?
And I suppose a lot of people are going to be thinking, well, is this something, therefore, that's going to continue? And there was a very, very nice article written in Gramophone magazine by their editor, Martin, this morning. And Martin had been visiting Fagiolini's rehearsals. And in it, he sort of says something along the lines of, I should have really thought about it to quote it.
Yeah,
so I'm probably about to inaccurately quote you, Martin. I apologise for that. But he talks about the fact that there's a feeling of permanence in the Live from London Festival now. And I think it's fair to say that we would like for, as we enter year two, for this to be something that continues. And yes, so excited to announce the Summer Festival.
And I think for us, that element of permanence has also been felt within the organisation and with all of the artists. Actually, this feeling that in this weird world of camera lenses, we've grown a new community, a big family all over the world. And of course, we want to be back making music, but we want to keep sharing music with all of our friends in the Live from London community.
And it should be said that, as Live from London continues, I think one of the things that we will also look to develop is, in inverted commas, normal concerts that we might do in this building or elsewhere in the UK where we have the capability to get out to. We would love to also bring to a digital audience. So we hope that we can share both Live from London as we know it now, but also grow it in that way and start to offer more and more and more. So it's very exciting. Should we spill some beans? Because it's sort of tantalising, isn't it?
In the concert welcome, like 25 minutes from now, I think we're going to mention a few names, aren't we? So should we save it for that? I think we should. Go on.
Okay.
Everyone can wait just a few more minutes, but maybe it's time to hand over to our interview for today.
Yes, we have some incredible artists who we know from Live from London before in the room, Fagiolini, who are here for their third visit. One of the things I love about this group and their director, Robert Hollingworth, is that they're like musical chameleons. They are so versatile. If you think back to the last Live from London summer, where they did that wonderful Monteverdi programme. Still, I think, one of the highlights of all of my Live from London experiences, hearing Nicholas Mulroy and Matthew Long singing Zeffiro Torna. I was in the room as well. It was a very special experience.
Pretty good.
Then they did that fantastic Messe de Menuit by Charpentier at Christmas, and today it's a fully a cappella programme and something completely different again, and really showing off their versatility. And of course joined today by Tamsin Greig. And we caught up with Robert and Tamsin a little bit earlier, and I was just,
You were just a little starstruck.
just a touch.
So, aren't we all? Anyway, should we head to that
Let's
now?
head to that now. So.
Good evening and welcome to this final Live from London spring concert. Now, if it's all sounding malodorous and unmelodic to you, fear not. This is the patented Hollingworth approach to tackling complex verse, as tonight's performance, entitled Rewilding the Wasteland, is given by the inimitable Fagiolini. It is interspersed with readings of T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland by the tremendous Tamsin Greig. But before we allow this timely unfurling of the bud, it's over to these three buds to discuss this evening's performance. But not before some last-minute pruning by our hair and makeup department.
To a very sunny day here in central London. So, well, it's someone who's...
I think we should start. Your hair is standing up on end.
See, that's the professional I'm really thinking.
And, I mean, you look really clever.
As I say, we're competitors,
could
so I
you
actually
do-
wanted him to look stupid.
I know, because your hair's really smooth.
Oh, is it? Oh, thanks. Can I get that right?
Fait tes cheveux.
It's your boyfriend.
Yes.
Oh, bah.
Alors,
Qu'est-ce que t'as fait avec les cheveux?
Exact.
Oh, tu m'as cassé tout.
Complètement con. Regarde pas.
Regarde cette connerie. Qu'est-ce que tu
Oui,
fais?
exactement. Sorry, meanwhile, back in the...
Right. Sorry
All
to
set?
interrupt.
That's no problem at all. The sun is streaming through the windows here in the Vauxhall State Centre in London, so it seems appropriate, I suppose, to talk about The Wasteland. I'm joined today by musical guest Robert Hollingworth, who is director of Fagiolini, of course, joining us tonight for this concert, and a wonderful actor, Tamsin Greig.
Greg.
Got it right. Had to check it off air because I'm one of those heathens who probably says it wrong, having heard it too many incorrect ways.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you so much for being here. Robert, let's throw the floor to you, because I suppose we are your guests as you have created this wonderful programme. So, Rewilding the Wasteland, where's that come from?
Well, it came from... it was one of those things where I thought, I've got this wonderful idea, Libby, my manager, Libby. I've got this wonderful idea that we should look at T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, forgetting that she'd said to me a few months previously, why didn't you look at T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland? And looked at the poem, totally failed to understand it. I talked to a few people who at least understand it more than I do, and thought that where we were a year ago, of everything stopping and people dying and rethinking life, that we were in a similar place, similar only to where T.S. Eliot had been back in 1922 when he wrote this, or it was 1921 when he wrote it, 22 when he published it, and thought, gosh, this is time to take stock and to use this poem as the centre of a programme in its 5 sections, and to try and take us on a musical journey from a wasteland that Bird describes in his first piece, but finishing and growing gradually, allowing green shoots of creation to come through. So we went to 3 composers and asked for 5 new commissions, which is quite a big thing for us. Joanna Marsh, Shruti Rajaseka and Ben Roeth. And sort of built the programme with them, really, rather than saying, actually, Shruti, I had a particular thought, but because of the Indian references in the last section of The Wasteland. But I wanted to build a programme that was quite thoughtful and reflective. Fagiolini has the odd ta-da moment in its concert sometimes, but this I don't think does. It's a thoughtful programme. And to try to have a bit of a think through the course of the concert.
Now, it's pretty hefty piece of poetry, as you said. So are we hearing the whole thing today from Tamsin, or have you picked sections of it?
Well, we're hearing bits, aren't we? We're hearing most of it, but it isn't, to do the whole thing is about 22, 23 minutes. So we've had to take sections from some of the pieces. Tamsin, I've done some strange choices, haven't I?
Yeah, you've done some filleting, for which I thank you, because it's not an easy piece to read or perform. And I think actually I did listen to Elliot himself doing a recording of it, and I think he stretches it to like 35 minutes. So in its entirety, it's
Pauses, Pinter.
Well, often that's where things are communicated, aren't they, in the silences? So I'm not surprised that he's left more thinking time for the listener. But it's it's quite a big work.
So, I mean, we know you from your work on screen. Do you ever work a lot in a musical context, or is this something a bit different for you?
I have done a couple of musical projects. So I narrated the Peter and the Wolf at the Barbican with the LSO, and the Snowman doing the which is fabulous. I have also actually performed in a musical. Had to learn how to sing over 18 months. Which
Got any tips?
None at all, really. I can't. No, I mean, I did spend 2 years trying to persuade them that I was not the girl they wanted, and they wouldn't take no for an answer. So I did do it, and it's the hardest thing I've ever.
I was going to ask,
done.
did you find that harder?
Really,
singing
really
harder
hard.
than
Yeah,
speaking?
it's the hardest thing I've ever done.
And from the work you have done with music, do you find that your spoken word is, or how is it impacted by listening to the music? Because tonight, for example, presumably, as you said, you've listened to Elliot speak this poetry. You've probably stood, I don't know, in front of a mirror, if you're anything like us, and practiced your delivery. But do you anticipate that because it's interspersed with the music, there'll be something that happens in the moment that makes it different?
Well, that's a great question. I think that there is a real crossover artistically between poetry and music. And that poetry elevates our experience of communicating to a sort of higher plane. And it's almost like a step up then to music. So poetry is the leg up, to use an interesting phrase, and up into this sort of the echelon of music. Who was it who said that all art aspires to the condition of music? I can't remember.
Not Leonardo da Vinci, who was slightly disparaging about music because
Right.
he says that it's ephemeral, and I've always thought that's its strongest point. But I mean, frankly, who wants to listen to an hour's choral music? I don't. I hate choral music. But when you
the big sell.
when you mix art forms, then one can give something to another. And you know, as humans, we respond to change. So music that is textural, and when the music stops, and silence, as you were just saying, and poetry, I think that makes for a really interesting experience. Which is why the words and music thing is definitely a thing.
Eliot also said about poetry that it is often communicated much more than understood.
Okay.
Thank goodness for that.
Yeah, because
Because
we
it's
don't understand
Because
this.
that's which gets me off the hook in the wasteland, because it's very, very complex, very difficult to actually understand. And I think that there was a commentator who originally read it when it was first published, who said that they had understood it, and was then, I think Eliot reflected on it and said it was over-understood.
Okay.
That actually, as with some music, well, actually with most music, is that you have to just let it speak to you in the same way that the poetry just has to speak to you, and you don't have to understand it
It's not such
to
an
experience
active...
it.
Yeah, sure.
E. Cummings said something similar. He said, try not to understand the poetry, let it understand you.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what that means, but I find it very comforting, given the number of voices, different voices there are in this poem. 1 minute you're in a pub somewhere in East London, next minute you're by the side of the Ganges or somewhere. And knowing that you're not supposed to understand it just allows you to actually relax and enjoy it more.
I think you're right. I suppose it's just about being available to it, to allow it to inhabit you.
Now, this year's been very interesting for us because we've had to learn to work with cameras, both that side of them and this side of them. And I'm sure there are many people who are watching this and many musicians out there who are turning to this digital age. As somebody who's been this side of the lens a lot, how can you use this environment to enhance a performance? So you've just said that poetry is the leg up to music. So as the person who's doing the poetry, can you use the lens and this environment in any way to lift the presentation of this sort
Well,
of
I
thing?
suppose it's about vicinity then, isn't it?
Okay.
It's about how the lens can, they say the camera is the lens, is the point into the soul, where the camera can actually get closer than a live performance. And certainly the National Theatre created a film version of Romeo and Juliet, which was supposed to be performed at the National Theatre
Sky Arts, isn't it? Yeah.
on Sky Arts, yeah. And
We can do product placement. It's fine.
and the brilliant thing about that was just how internal you can become as a performer,
Okay.
because the lens is then going inside with you, and you then meet on a very different plane where the poetry is actually much more internalized through that technological medium. So there is a meeting which is sort of otherwhere.
Yeah.
But it does mean that you have to be incredibly, like the lens, focused.
And then in terms of your preparation, does that mean, because it has to be so internalised, is that to almost a new level than performing, say, live in the National Theatre? Is there an element more to your preparation in order to get it to that point, or would you be doing that anyway?
I think you'd be doing that anyway. Yeah, hopefully.
It's a lesson to us all who do Evensong in 20 minutes.
That's interesting because I'm doing some commedia dell'arte and being told absolutely you must not practice this in front of a mirror,
Okay.
because you're meant to be bearing your soul. Everything you're meant to do is very, very you and honest. And if it's at all knowing, and I suppose that's the thing about when the camera is very, very close, there's nowhere to hide. That's what we find watching these broadcasts. This is our third one in this series we'd be delighted to take part in. And it's horrendous afterwards, seeing yourself. I say this to my students as well at University of York. You probably need to film yourself, but you'll have to watch it 2 or 3 times before you can take anything good away from it.
Yeah.
Because do I really look like that? Is my hair done? All that kind of thing. Yes, I will not make a window into men's souls. That's Queen Elizabeth, isn't it? Which feeds into our very first, our second piece, the William Byrd that we start with, where Byrd is railing against the treatments given to Catholics in the 1580s. And by that stage, Walsingham was making a window into men's souls, and people weren't allowed to worship as Catholics. And this takes us to our Deus Veneret Gentes, which is the bleaker end of this programme. I suppose the programme is like a sort of grey and white image that will turn green with new growth by the end of the hour. We hope. We'll have to see.
So I'm somebody who loves to sit in a concert and have waypoints, things that I know or hooks that I can catch. So from a musical perspective, obviously you love all the music and everything's there for a reason, but are there 2 or 3 moments that you would really ask us to look out for?
Well, I think Kenneth Layton's rhapsodic setting of Jeremiah Manley Hopkins' A God's Grandeur is a high point for me. I think it's one of the great short chord pieces of the 20th century. He so understood the poem. And particularly because Joanna Marsh's second commission, The World is Charged, takes the first line, or at least the poem that she's set, which is John F. Dean's The World is Charged, has taken Manley Hopkins' sonnet as his starting point. And she's taken a line out of the Leighton as her starting point. So there's this double connection. And it's a tremendously moving piece, but not in a kind of ta-na moment again. You suddenly realise about 6 minutes into it, 7 minutes long, that you're moved. And as a singer, you have to be very careful because you can't give in to that. You have to retain a certain amount of control. So I would say Joanna's, it's iniquitous, isn't it, really, to choose 2 pieces. Sorry, other composers. Joanna's second piece, connecting that with the Leighton God's Grandeur, is one particular link for me.
And you've already touched on the Byrd. That, if people haven't seen it, has already featured in Live from London. So do you want to just tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, in that we've done one of our Fagiolini's Sing the Score episodes on the Byrd, which is a big 13-minute piece. We're only doing 2 minutes of it in this before Ben Rowath's new pieces take the same text. But we've done this little programme, which you can now see, called Sing the Score, about Byrd's Deus Veneret Gentes, which features strange things like the Ficta Police, get the T-shirt, reveal, the Ficta hotline, where you can ring a number and someone will answer and tell you whether to put an extra sharp or flat in. It's a strange thing. I'm not sure who really enjoys it, but it's a good way of trying to understand about the Byrd. and to get, it's like taking the car bonnet off and getting your hands dirty, and then you get to sing along with the track at the end with the performance that we did last night.
Okay, so
Can I ask a question
Absolutely.
actually about what you feel female composers bring to art as opposed to, you know, the sort of traditional male composers?
I don't know that I could say that it was inherently female, and I'd be wary of going into cliche land. All I can say is that with the two composers that we worked on this project, Shruti Rajaseka and Joanna Marsh, they found something that I hadn't expected, a route in to poetry and inspiration that I hadn't found. And Claire Pelly, actually, who came up with some of these suggestions for Joanna Marsh's poetry. And most of her suggestions actually were female poets, not out of any sense of this is what we're going to do, just things that were suitable. And there's an openness to it, and I don't know, is that more female? But the poems I found very moving, but again, I don't know why. The one she set by Patty Ann Rogers from 1993 called Geocentric, it's extraordinary. It's just a list, apparently, of things that are rotting and the smells they give off. And then there's this punchline that you're not expecting that I'm not going to say now. But I think I'm generally outside my depth when it comes to poetry, even composition.
I thought you were going to say you were outside your depth when it comes to women.
I'm hands up.
well, probably that too.
I'll leave now.
Tamsin, we talk a lot to musicians, as you can imagine, on this series. And one thing people, the other side of the lens, love to know about is what's going on inside during a performance. So from your perspective today, obviously you have to deliver this complex, deep poetry to a lens. We've spoken about that. Then you have to stop, listen to music, do it again. So during the concert, what sort of mental space will you be in? What thoughts are filling your mind?
Yes, it's very interesting. I think, well, I hope that this year, where people have not been able to experience live performance, that they will be experiencing a sense of the tragic loss of what it is to be in the room, of something happening. And I'm really excited, actually. I woke up excited this morning about the thought of just being in a space where people are performing live, because I just haven't had that for this year. And I suppose it's just about being present to what might happen, because I think in live performance you used a brilliant word where you find yourself moved. In an emotional, psychological sense, but also actually positionally. Sometimes we come out of something and we've actually, our point of view, we've actually been moved. And that takes a kind of surrender to be prepared to be moved. But you also know that you have to hold on to the discipline of performance.
Yeah,
Like
I've struggled with this.
Well,
I've been caught out by this a lot.
I can tell you what goes through my head through a performance. It's this terrible sort of squiggle, just sort of, because you're working, your brain is working through adrenaline at such a speed that you can find yourself thinking about things that have nothing to do with the performance. At times, you really are on enormous processing speed, if you like.
But I think that's what Eliot is doing in the poem. Not that I have any understanding of what.
Yeah, I think we've already covered that. None of us have a clue what's going on in that.
But I think it's almost like a document of all of the voices that happen to be popping up in his head, all those allusions and references and experiences with other pieces of art that happen to appear at that time, and he just gives space to them without letting the noodles overwhelm him. He just gives them the dignity that they owe. And so I suppose that's what you do as a performer, is just give each line its own dignity.
But without letting it overtake you. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, well, a lot to look forward to. But before I let you go, I want to ask you both one question, because here at Voces 8, we are a foundation. We're very invested in young people, in offering opportunities. And to have people with your experience sat here on the stage, it would be silly for me not to ask for one piece of advice for somebody who would one day like to be sat in your seat? Anything at all?
Yeah, yes, I've got one. I teach at the University of York, and I'm faced with a lot of sort of 18 to 23-year-olds that really want to be in the business, and it's a very hard business to be in. I would say don't worry about that. If you really want to do art of some form in your life, you'll do it anyway at some level that is appropriate to you, and whether it's on an amateur level or professional level, it doesn't really matter. You will just find a way in. So don't worry too much about the end game. Just enjoy the ride.
Okay, very good.
Yeah,
Tamsin,
what he said.
What he said.
Because we don't want any more competition, obviously.
Well, I think actually what you've already spoken about with this idea of surrendering to what's around you, but not beyond the point of discipline. You know, so much we see people who've practiced, like in front of the mirror, and they've really created something that they're happy to deliver, and that they're actually unable to then walk in the room and respond to the moment. And that
I think as well that so many young people, this sort of generation of young people have been so processed through, you know, it's so goal orientated. It's like, what do you want to be doing in 2 years' time? What do you need to do in order to get there in 3 years' time? And okay, so that's a structure, but I think that it means, particularly coming through this year of lockdown, that all of that has been challenged because there are no goals. At the moment now, it's just, can we get through today? Mm-hmm. And I do think that there is something about that holding in tension what you hope to happen, but also being alive to what is happening. And so I think it's just being...
Carpe diem. Robin Williams in, not Good Morning Vietnam, in one of those films. Carpe diem.
Seize the day.
Be
Indeed.
Here. Be
Yeah.
here right now.
Great. Well, this is a wonderful collaboration, so I'm sure it's going to spring some fantastic fresh roots for our spring to close our festival. So thank you for being here, and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to this final concert as part of the Live from London Spring Festival, where we are thrilled to be welcoming back our many times collaborators with the festival, Fagiolini and their wonderful director Robert Hollingworth, with a special guest, Tamsin Greig. Now, Robert believes that choral music isn't just a collection of beautiful chords and sounds, but that it's all based around the text. And if ever you've been to any of Robert's rehearsals or seen Fagiolini live or witnessed their work, you will know the importance that they place on the text in the music that they're singing. So for that reason, a special plea from Robert to please go and find your programme so that you can follow along with the texts. In fact, for the first time ever tonight, we have gone as far as, in the final piece of the concert, placing some subtitles onto the performance so that you can really understand what those final words are about after we've heard the last piece of poetry by Eliot.
And so to get there, I knew you were going to leave this bit for me. You need to head to the voces8.foundation website. And when you find the Programmes tab, you need to use, for the last time in this series, the password LFLV8F2020. And I suspect it's going to be just here for you. So there we go. Now, if you were here from the very beginning of tonight's show, then we talked a little bit about plans for the future, and we promised that at this moment we would announce properly our plans for a Live from London Summer Festival.
Yes, the theme is going to be all about regeneration, and we have both some artists that have been with us before and also some artists who are appearing for the first time. So I'm going to let Paul go first. Name an artist, Paul.
An artist. I'm going to pick Aura Singers, conducted by Susie Digby.
Okay, and I will say the King Singers.
I knew you wanted that one, really.
And also we're thrilled to be inviting a host of guests, including the wonderful Chineke Orchestra, Jack Liebeck with a star quartet of himself, Sheku Kenna-Mason and Julian Bliss, and so many people.
It's going to be pretty good. I think we have the ECO coming back to join us.
Absolutely, the English Chamber Orchestra. Lots and lots to look forward to. Something slightly different, actually, is that Voxers 8 is appearing in every single one of the programmes with a guest appearance. I would say that was not necessarily something we set out with as an idea, but by the time we put the programme together and spoken to various artists who'd said they would love to do a little bit of collaboration with us, we were in sort of 70 or 80% of the concerts anyway, so we're thrilled to be appearing with everybody.
And alongside all of those people we've just mentioned, we're also going to be doing a special distanced Live from London with Live from Harlem taking part in an extra season ticket, aren't we?
Absolutely. So a lot to look forward to. We're going to be making all of the details available and tickets as well from the 4th of May. And of course, as ever, there will be an early bird discount for all those of you who have supported us over these past seasons.
As Barney is just mentioning there, you are incredibly important to us. And with this being the last of the spring season, I think we just need to take an opportunity to thank all of you for being huge supporters of these first 3 Live from London seasons. We deeply hope you will join us for the next adventure in the summer. And of course, as things change around in the world around us, with hopefully some live music beginning to happen, we're happy to say that we're going to be continuing with our Live from London festivals long, we hope, into the future. But that's only going to be possible if you continue to join us. So please do pick up a ticket when you can. I also need to thank a few other people tonight. Most importantly, I think, are the entire production team and all of the artists who've been involved in this festival. It's been just an incredible experience for all of us to be able to make music in some way, and it would not have been possible without those marvellous musicians and everyone also behind the screen. You'll also have noticed we had a lot of sponsors getting involved for this spring season, and tonight I'm thrilled that we will be saying thank you to Ginny and Richard Salter, and also to the Foster family, who are co-sponsoring tonight's concert. If you're interested in getting involved on that side of things in the future, then please do contact us, and we'd love to give you some information about what's going to be happening and how you can do that. Have I got any more thank yous to give, Brian?
I don't think so, Paul. So I think without further ado, let's hand over to Robert Hollingworth, Fagiolini, and their guest, Tamsin Greig.
Hello and welcome to our programme, Rewilding the Wasteland, which takes as its inspiration and its structure the 5 sections of T.S. Eliot's groundbreaking poem, The Wasteland, published 99 years ago this year, in the immediate aftermath of both the Spanish flu epidemic but also World War I, a time like in the 14th century after the Black Death, and indeed our own now, in which some of the certainties of life had been removed. It's a poem full of references, and unless you are astonishingly well-read, many of them will elude you on first or even second and third listening. Don't worry, just relish the different voices that come through the poem, that speak in the poem as it takes us on its journey from the burial of the dead, the first section, through the chess game, the fire sermon, death by water, and finally, what the thunder said. In our first section, which is the bleakest of all, Eliot's poem is interspersed with a psalm text describing the wasteland that God's chosen people found themselves in thousands of years ago, but picked up by Tudor composer William Byrd as an analogy for the suffering of Catholics in 1580s England. O God, the Gentiles are come into thine inheritance. They have defiled thy holy temple and made Jerusalem into a ruin. And this text continues in 2 short new commissions by Ben Roworth. They have laid out the dead bodies of thy servants as food for the birds of the air. They have poured out their blood like water, and there was no one to bury them. But we start with music by a Spanish contemporary of William Byrd's, Tomás Vitoria, the first of 3 of his Tenebrae responsories that you'll hear throughout the programme that similarly use Old Testament language to pinpoint moments at the time of Christ's crucifixion. O ye that pass by, see if there be any sorrow like unto my sorrow.
April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried tubers. Summer surprised us, coming over the Starnberger See with a shower of rain. We stopped in the colonnade and went on in sunlight into the Hofgarten and drank coffee, talked for an hour. Bin gar keine Russin, stamm aus Litauen, echt Deutsch. And when we were children, staying at the Archduke's, my cousin's, he took me out on a sled. And I was frightened. He said, Marie, Marie, hold on tight. And down we went. In the mountains there, you feel free. I read much of the night and go south in the winter. What are the roots that clutch? What branches grow out of this stony rubbish? Son of man, you cannot say or guess, for you know only a heap of broken images, where the sun beats and the dead tree gives no shelter, the cricket no relief, and the dry stone no sound of water. Only there is shadow under this red rock. Come in under the shadow of this red rock, and I will show you something different from either your shadow at morning, striding behind you, or your shadow at evening, rising to meet you. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. Frisch weht der Wind der Heimat zu, mein irisch Kind. Wo weilest du? You gave me hyacinths first. A year ago, they called me the Hyacinth Girl. Yet when we came back late from the hyacinth garden, your arms full and your hair wet, I could not speak. And my eyes failed. I was neither living nor dead, and I knew nothing. Looking into the heart of light, the silence. Öd und leer, das Meer. Madame Sosostris, famous clairvoyante, had a bad cold. Nevertheless, is known to be the wisest woman in Europe with a wicked pack of cards. "Here," said she, "is your card, the drowned Phoenician sailor." Those are pearls that were his eyes. Look. "Here is Belladonna, the lady of the rocks, the lady of situations. Here is the man with 3 staves, and here the wheel, and here is the one-eyed merchant. And this card, which is blank, is something he carries on his back, which I am forbidden to see. I do not find the hanged man. Fear death by water. I see crowds of people walking round in a ring. Thank you. If you see dear Mrs. Equitone, tell her I bring the horoscope myself. One must be so careful these days." unreal city. Under the brown fog of a winter dawn, the crowd flowed over London Bridge, so many. I had not thought death had undone so many. Sighs, short and infrequent, were exhaled, and each man fixed his eyes before his feet, flowed up the hill and down King William Street to where St. Mary Woolnoth kept the hours, with a dead sound on the final stroke of 9. There I saw one I knew, and stopped him, crying, "Stetson! You who were with me in the ships at Miley! That corpse you planted last year in your garden, has it begun to sprout? Will it bloom this year? Or has the sudden frost disturbed its bed? Oh, keep the dog far hence, that's friend to men, or with his nails he'll dig it up again. You, hypocrite lecteur, mon semblable, mon frère."
As we move on to the second and third sections of T.S. Eliot's The Waste Land, we start with music by Kenneth Layton, setting Gerald Manley Hopkins' rapturous sonnet, God's Grandeur, which in a very Attenborough-esque way notes the damage we've done to the planet, but says, "And for all this, nature is never spent, because the Holy Ghost over the bent world broods with warm breast and with bright wings." Well, with climate change, that seems to be rather optimistic now, and we refer to this later on. Another Victoria setting, then, from the dimly lit service of Tenebrae, Shadows, for Holy Week. "My eyes became dim with weeping, for he that consoled me is far from me." And then the first of Joanna Marsh's 2 commissions in this concert, setting Patty Ann Rogers' fabulous 1993 poem, Geocentric. I'll let it speak for itself, but it's not often you get to sing words like these. And a reminder that you can download a programme for this concert which has the full texts for the sung poetry, worth it particularly in this case.
From
My nerves are bad tonight. Yes, bad. Stay with me. Speak to me. Why do you never speak? Speak. What are you thinking of? What thinking? What? I never know what you're thinking. Think. I think. We're in Rat's Alley, where the dead men lost their bones. What is that noise? The wind under the door. What is that noise now? What is the wind doing? Nothing. Again. Nothing. Do you know nothing? Do you see nothing? Do you remember? Nothing. I remember. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Are you alive or not? Is there nothing in your head? But, oh, 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 that Shakespearean rag. It's so elegant, so intelligent. What shall I do now? What shall I do? I shall rush out, as I am, and walk in the street with my hair down. So, what shall we do tomorrow? What shall we ever do? The hot water at 10. And if it rains, a closed car at 4. And we shall play a game of chess, pressing lidless eyes and waiting for a knock upon the door. When Lil's husband got demobbed, I didn't mince my words, I said to him myself, hurry up please, it's time. Now Albert's coming back, make yourself a bit smart. He'll want to know what you done with that money he gave you to get yourself some teeth. He did, I was there. You have them all out, Lil, and get a nice set, he said. I swear, I can't bear to look at you, and no more can't I. I said, think of poor Albert. He's been in the army 4 years. He wants a good time. And if you don't give it him, there's others will. I said, oh, is there? She said, something of that. I said, then I'll know to thank, she said, and give me a straight look. Hurry up, please, it's time. If you don't like it, you can get on with it, I said. Others can pick and choose if you can't, but if Albert makes off, won't be for lack of telling, you ought to be ashamed, I said, to look so antique. And her only 31. I can't help it, she said, pulling a long face. It's them pills I took to bring it off, she said. She's had 5 already. Nearly died of young George. The chemist said it'd be all right. But I've never been the same. You are a proper fool, I said. Well, if Albert won't leave you alone, there it is, I said. What'd you get married for if you don't want children? Hurry up, please, it's time. Well, that Sunday, Albert was home. They had a hot gammon. They asked me in to dinner to get the beauty of it hot. Hurry up, please, it's time. Hurry up, please, it's time. Good night, Bill. Good night, Lou. Good night, May. Good night. Ta-ta, good night, good night. Good night, ladies. Good night. Sweet ladies. Good night. Good night. The river's tent is broken. The last fingers of leaf clutch and sink into the wet bank. The wind crosses the brown land, unheard. The nymphs are departed. Sweet Thames, run softly till I end my song. The river bears no empty bottles, sandwich papers, silk handkerchiefs, cardboard boxes, cigarette ends, or other testimony of summer nights. The nymphs are departed, and their friends, the loitering heirs of city directors, departed, have left no addresses. By the waters of Lehman, I sat down and wept. Sweet Thames, run softly till I end my song. Sweet Thames, run softly, for I speak not loud or long. But at my back, in a cold blast, I hear the rattle of the bones and chuckle spread from ear to ear. A rat crept softly through the vegetation, dragging its slimy belly on the bank, while I was fishing in the dull canal on a winter evening round behind the gas house, musing upon the king my brother's wreck, and on the king my father's death before him. White bodies, naked, on the low, damp ground, and bones, cast in a little low, dry garret, rattled by the rat's foot only, year to year. But at my back, from time to time, I hear the sound of horns and motors, which shall bring Sweeney to Mrs. Porter in the spring. Oh, the moon shone bright on Mrs. Porter and on her daughter. They washed their feet in soda water. Et oh, ces voix d'enfants chantant dans la coupole. Tweet, tweet, tweet. Jug, jug. Jug, jug. Jug, jug. So rudely forced. Terrible. Unreal city. Under the brown fog of a winter noon, Mr. Eugenides, the Smyrna merchant, unshaven, with a pocketful of current, CIF London, documents at sight, asked me, in demotic French, to luncheon at the Cannon Street Hotel, followed by a weekend at the Metropole. At the violet hour, when the eyes and back turn upward from the desk, when the human engine waits like a taxi, throbbing, waiting. I, Tiresias, though blind, throbbing between two lives, old man with wrinkled female breasts, can see at the violet hour, the evening hour that strives homeward and brings the sailor home from sea, the typist home at tea time, clears her breakfast, lights her stove, and lays out food in tins. Out of the window, perilously spread, her drying combinations touched by the sun's last rays. On the divan are piled at night her bed stockings, slippers, camisoles and stays. I, Tiresias, old man with wrinkled dugs, perceived the scene and foretold the rest. I too awaited the expected guest. He, the young man, carbuncular, arrives, a small house agent's clerk with one bold stare, one of the low on whom assurance sits as a silk hat on a Bradford millionaire. The time is now propitious, as he guesses. The meal is ended, she is bored and tired, endeavours to engage her in caresses, which still are unreproved if undesired. Flushed and decided, he assaults at once. Exploring hands encounter no defence. His vanity requires no response and makes a welcome of indifference, and I, Tiresias, have forsuffered all enacted on this same divan or bed, I who have sat by Thebes below the wall and walked among the lowest of the dead, bestows one final patronizing kiss and gropes his way, finding the stairs unlit. She turns, looks a moment in the glass, hardly aware of her departed lover. Her brain allows one half-formed thought to pass. Well, now that's done. And I'm glad it's over. When lovely woman stoops to folly and paces about her room again alone, she smooths her hair with automatic hand and puts a record on the gramophone.
Indecent, self-soiled, bilious reek of turnip and toadstool, decay, the black oil of wilted succulents, a brown festa of rotting orchids in that stain of stink, foam down your front, that leaking royal bracket funky down your back, you purple-head grainy fuzzed smalls of refuse, fumes and oils and powdery mildews, enduring the constant interruption of sink, my flatulent, contagious with earwax, coarse smut, blister rust, backwash and graveyard dairy, rich with manure and dry rot, harboring not only egg-addled garbage and wrinkled lip,
The last part of our concert, Rewilding the Wasteland, takes the final two sections of T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland section. And musically, we're going to finish with another setting by Joanna Marsh, a new commission, and she's taken a poem by Irish poet John F. Dean, which itself takes the first line of Gerard Manley Hopkins's God's Grandeur, which is the world is charged. And it takes that, the world is charged, as its own title. And it seems, to me at least, to start as a stream of consciousness about nature around you, but gives way to a deep sense of contact with things around you, nature, and the presence of people who've lived here before. And we have been years, she and I, walking by fields where generations lived and loved, have laboured and have disappeared, with their sheds and implements and cattle, into the deep where they stay resonant in their silence. That comes just after most of the final section of The Wasteland, called What the Thunder Said, which references Hindu culture. And so we're proceeding this with a new work by Shruti Rajasekar that takes Hindu references and also asks about how we should change our own behaviour, specifically towards a sacred object such as the Ganges River, Ganga in its old word. We start, though, with Vaughan Williams's serene silence and music, itself inspired by Stanford's classic, The Bluebird. And its final verse seems particularly apt. Voices of grief and from the heart of joy, so near to comprehension do we stand, that wind and sea and all of winged delight lie in the octaves of man's voice and hand. And music wakes from silence where it slept. And of course, music hasn't been entirely silent these last few months, this last year, because of initiatives like this, Voces 8's Live from London series. So we're delighted to be taking part. It's a lifeline for us as well as you. And I love the, and I don't mean this in a bad way, homemade sense of this, in that the guy who was conducting the B minor Mass last week is now standing behind the camera filming this. Hi, Barney.
Silence,
Phlebas, the Phoenician, a fortnight dead, forgot the cry of gulls and the deep sea swell and the profit and loss. A current under sea picked his bones in whispers as he rose and fell. He passed the stages of his age and youth, entering the whirlpool. Gentile or Jew, oh, you who turn the wheel and look to windward, consider Phlebas, who was once handsome and tall as you. Who is the third? Who walks always beside you? When I count, there are only you and I together, but when I look ahead up the white road, there's always another one, walking beside you, gliding wrapped in a brown mantle, hooded. I do not know whether a man or a woman. But who is that on the other side of you? What is that sound? High in the air. Murmur of maternal lamentation. Who are those hooded hordes swarming over endless plains, stumbling in cracked earth, ringed by the flat horizon only? What is the city over the mountains? Cracks and reforms and bursts in the violet air. Falling towers. Jerusalem, Athens, Alexandria, Vienna, London. Unreal. A woman drew her long black hair out tight and fiddled whisper music on those strings, and bats with baby faces in the violet light whistled and beat their wings and crawled head downward down a blackened wall and upside down in air were towers, tolling reminiscent bells that kept the hours, and voices singing out of empty cisterns and exhausted wells. In this decayed hole among the mountains, in the faint moonlight, the grass is singing over the tumbled graves. About the chapel, there is the empty chapel. Only the wind's home. It has no windows, and the door swings. Dry bones can harm no one. Only a cock stood on the roof tree. Cocorico, cocorico. In a flash of lightning. Then, a damp gust, bringing rain. Ganga was sunken, and the limp leaves waited for rain, while the black clouds gathered far distant over Himavant. The jungle crouched, humped in silence. Then spoke the thunder. Da. Data. What have we given? My friend. Blood shaking my heart. The awful daring. of a moment's surrender, which an age of prudence can never retract. By this and this only we have existed, which is not to be found in our obituaries or in memories, draped by the beneficent spider, or under seals broken by the lean solicitor. In our empty rooms. Da. Diadva. I've heard the key turn in the door once, and turn once only. We think of the key each in his prison. Thinking of the key, each confirms a prison. Only at nightfall, ethereal rumours revive for a moment. A broken Coriolanus. Da. Damyata. The boat responded gaily to the hand expert with sail and oar. The sea was calm. Your heart would have responded gaily when invited, beating, obedient to controlling hands. I sat upon the shore, fishing, with the arid plain behind me. Shall I at least set my lands in order? London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. Poi s'ascose nel fuoco che li affina, quando fiam uti Celadon. Oh, swallow, swallow. Le prince d'Aquitaine à la tour abolie. These fragments I have shored against my ruins. Why then, I'll fit you. Hieronymo's mad again. Data. Diadvam. Damyata. Shanti. Shanti. Shanti.
His water